Hello, hello, hello. Boy, do I have a story for you. It's about a very interesting person. Not very likable, but it doesn't matter. He's not around. He's dead. Craig J. Spence. He was born October 25th, 1940. He was an American journalist, he was a lobbyist, and he was a socialite. And also quite a bit of a bullshit artist. In any event, he self-deleted in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Boston, November 1989, following an exposé in the Washington Times, which reported on his involvement in a male prostitution ring and also allegations of blackmail. So let's get into it. Craig Spence. He attended Syracuse University and he began his journalism career for WCBS in New York City. He eventually became a correspondent for ABC News. Now, this was during the Vietnam War, so he covered Southeast Asia. But as soon as he got there, in 1969, he got himself in a little bit of trouble. You see, you really weren't supposed to exchange currency on the black market. Maybe everyone did it, but if you got caught, that was kind of a no-no. So he got kicked out of Vietnam by the government. So ABC News relocated him to Tokyo. And there, Craig Spence, he found work as a freelance reporter and a stringer for this British publication that's still around to this day called the Daily Mail. I actually like it a lot. Spence spent about a decade in Tokyo, during which he made prominent connections during the time of great economic growth. You may have heard of Japan's bubble economy, the 1980s. Anyways, Spence began doing public relations and consulting for government-supported Japan External Trade Organization, otherwise known as JETRO, and also a number of Japanese corporations. A number of people that you and I know, like our friend Robert Whiting, knew Spence. Spence would often hang out at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. And I don't think he was well regarded. He would, according to one article I recall reading a long time ago in the Tokyo Journal, he would take it upon himself to lecture other members, other expat journalists about manners, comportment, deportment. The one story I recall was he approached a journalist, I can't remember if he's American or Australian, named Murray Sale, who was smoking a stogie, a cigar. And I think his opening line to Murray Sale was, "Didn't anyone teach you any manners about that thing?" And I think the guy was told to politely but firmly fuck off. He was also known for hosting these lavish parties in this quite large stately condominium in Kodansha. Kodansha is a pretty, it's by the British Embassy, it's near Yasukuni Shrine, it's near the palace. And one of the things that I read about was often he would really be interested in young U.S. Marines. So, Max was not old enough to be around, but still, yeah, kind of a little bit of a relief. Like he wasn't looking for little Maxes, yeah? Yes, so he was gay. Anyways, sometime after his stint in Tokyo, Japan, he then moved on to Washington, D.C., and this was in the late 1970s, I guess. So he soon became a fixture of the Washington high society, leading to a 1982 feature in the New York Times, which remarked that Spence's, quote, personal phone book and a party guest list constitute, quote, a who's who of Congress, government, and journalism. And so the names of some of the guests of his lavish parties included people like William Safir, John N. Mitchell, Phyllis Schlafly, James Lilly, Alfred M. Gray, and Joseph de Genova, and also the lawyer Roy Cohn. Yeah. So in 1985, in January, Spence registered with the U.S. State Department as a foreign agent for Japan. You need to do this. This is under FARA, called the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Doesn't cost you anything, but if you fail to do so, I believe it's a felony. Anyways, he began lobbying for Japanese interests, and throughout the 80s, Spence built a reputation as an influential lobbyist who represented many Japanese concerns, and he established close friendships with a number of Japanese politicians, including someone named Moto Shina. And he was at the time considered by a lot of analysts to be the inside favorite to succeed the scandal-plagued Prime Minister Sosuke Uno. Never did. I also recall, I think maybe at the same time, Michael Green, I think Michael Green still heads CSIS, Center for Strategic Studies. He was a research assistant or intern for Motoshina. Anyway, Spence was close friends with a journalist named Liz Trotta, Trotta, who she wrote extensively about Spence in her memoirs. And the two met in 1966 at Leonard Bernstein's home, and the two later found themselves working together as war correspondents during the Vietnam War at ABC News. And so Trotta later recalled the various personalities that she would see at his Washington, D.C. parties. They included Ted Koppel, William Casey, former CIA director, and also Eric Sevareid. So Liz Trotta also recalled going on one of Spence's midnight tours of the White House. And that would later get a ton of extensive media coverage. Now we're going to move on to what I mentioned earlier, the prostitution ring. It was called the Vinson prostitution ring, named after Henry Vinson, Vinson. So Craig Spence's name came to national prominence in the aftermath of a June 29th, 1989 front page article in the Washington Times. It identified Spence as a major customer of a homosexual escort service, which had been raided in February 1989, and it was now under investigation by the Secret Service, the DC Police, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for suspected credit card fraud. The ring was being operated by Henry Vinson, hence the name, who had been using, get this, a funeral parlor to launder the money being made. Yes. More than one stiff involved, I guess. Clients included, quote, key officials of the Reagan and Bush administrations, and Spence was mentioned by name again and again and again. The newspaper said he spent as much as $20,000 a month on the services. So Spence had also been linked to a White House guard. His name was Reginald de Gelder, who allowed Spence and his friends to take late-night White House tours. So among the guests in his midnight tours were two male prostitutes. Woohoo! A White House probe regarding the tours led the Secret Service to furlough the three guards. But they tried to stress that the first family's security was never threatened, and it was explained that security guards were allowed to give private tours. President Bush was also made aware of the scandal. I think there was a name also involved, a senator in Boston, we'll go to Boston later, named Barney Frank. I think the late Senator John McCain called him Barney Fag one time. That was kind of funny, but now it's considered hate speech, so make sure you don't say it in Scotland. Okay, a follow-up article featured reports from Spence's friends and guests, which indicated that Spence's home was wired up with extensive surveillance equipment and that he would attempt to entice guests into sexual encounters with prostitutes to use as blackmail. This was Craig Spence. This was in the 1980s. Does that sound familiar? I don't know. I can't think of anyone who did that kind of thing. Let me get back to it. Anyways, one male soldier reported that he had been enticed into an encounter with a female prostitute by Spence, who then used the photos of the tryst in order to blackmail him into, quote, beating up a couple of guys. When the same soldier afterward refused to have sex with Spence, Spence showed the photos to the soldier's wife, leading to the couple's separation. Wow. Anyways, Spence entered a downward spiral in the wake of the exposé. So he increasingly involved himself with call boys and crack cocaine. He disappeared briefly and evaded government agents who wanted to subpoena him to testify about the Vincent prostitution ring. So Spence made headlines again after his arrest on July 31st, 1989, at the Barbizon Hotel on East 63rd Street in Manhattan for criminal possession of a firearm and criminal possession of cocaine. Again, that was crack cocaine, not the powdered white cocaine. The reason why was he was really down on his luck, and so that's what he could afford. He couldn't afford the powder. In August of 1989, during an 8-hour interview with the Washington Times, Spence denied that Reginald de Gelder alone had cleared the White House tours, and he explained the guard only served as a guide. And the two reporters, Michael Hedges and Jerry Sepper, would write that, quote, Mr. Spence hinted the tours were arranged by, quote, top-level persons, including Donald Gregg, that's Gregg, the National Security Advisor to the Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush at the time the tours were given. Donald Gregg was also CIA agency station chief in Seoul, and I think he was later made ambassador to South Korea. Anyways, when pressed to identify who it was who got him inside the White House, Spence rhetorically asked, quote, who was it who got, quote, long-term CIA operative Felix Rodriguez to see Bush? Basically, he was alluding to that it was Donald Gregg. Gregg himself dismissed the claims and allegations as, quote, absolute bullshit, according to the two reporters. And he continued, and he was kind of angry, apparently. He said, it disturbs me that he can reach a slimy hand out of the sewer to grab me by the ankle like this. He told the reporters that allegations are totally false. Okay, just the ankle. Okay. During the same interview, Spence claimed that the surveillance equipment at his home had been set up by, quote, friendly intelligence agents. Okay, rumors of Craig's ties to the CIA dated back to the Vietnam correspondence days, and the CIA was also speculated by some, actually, I think encouraged by Spence himself, to be one of the sources of his wealth by his acquaintances. Let's get to his self-deletion. It's kind of interesting. So we moved through the summer of 89, and on November 10th, 1989, Craig J. Spence was found dead. He was barricaded in room 429 of the Boston Ritz-Carlton Hotel. That was at the time the city's most expensive hotel. He was dressed in a tuxedo, and he had only $3 in his pocket. According to the police report, when found by the hotel employees, he was attired in the style he affected at his lavish dinner parties. He had on a black tux, he had a white shirt, bow tie, suspenders, black socks, and shoes. And he also had a telephone cradled in his ear and a Walkman headset, and he had a cassette tape of Mozart's A Little Night Music. So next to his body was a newspaper clipping about efforts to protect CIA agents from testifying before government agencies. I think that should be like CIA officers. An agent is anybody that the CIA chooses to use, extort, threaten, bribe, or whatever. His death would later be ruled a suicide from ingesting alcohol and antidepressants. Okay, so apparently they found in a false ceiling in the bathroom, there were 7 small packets of Xanax, and they found, which is an anti-anxiety drug, and 1 pill was removed. And so in black felt tip marker, he had written on the mirror of his room the following: Chief, consider this my resignation, effective immediately. As you always said, you can't ask others to make a sacrifice if you are not ready to do the same. Life is duty. God bless America. And as a postscript, he wrote, P.S. to the Ritz, please forgive this inconvenience. I'm just going to say right now, I think that was totally poser, rather than read this and say, oh my God, yes, he was working for the CIA, and oh, he was thinking of duty, honor, country, and all this. No, I think this was all part and parcel of his whole facade. He was a fabulist. Anyways, it also says, like, during the lengthy August interview with Michael Hedges and Jerry Semper, which was over at Liz Trotta's apartment in Manhattan. This is a few months before his death. Spence kind of alluded to more intricate involvements, and he was saying, all this stuff you've uncovered, to be honest with you, is insignificant compared to other things I've done. But I'm not going to tell you those things, and somehow the world will carry on. Shortly before that, in a phone call with Trotta, during which she encouraged Spence to turn himself in, this is before he was caught with the firearm and the crack, he said, he retorted to her that they wouldn't be able to solve the, quote, big thing. And so that's kind of the end of the life and times of Craig Spence. There are other details. I have an old article. So if you talk about the White House guard, Reginald that got him in, included details like Spence gave him an $8,000 gold Rolex watch. This was back in 1988. So, and other kind of funny things and what people said about him. But he was kind of a big name-dropping egomaniac, I would say delusional narcissist. I talk to people like that even today. They'll do things like they'll drop messages that they mistakenly sent. They're going, oh, yeah, I don't want that big deal. You're going to pay me a lot of money going to doing this area. And it's, they're making it sound cool, mysterious, and they later then they say, oops, I'm sorry I sent it to you. What they're trying to do is create this illusion, but it's pretty lame. And I think this guy did a lot of it. But boy, there were a lot of similarities with the escort services and the alleged blackmail, and also the surveillance equipment. If people question how difficult it'd be for Jeffrey Epstein to set that up in his time, think about that in the 1980s for someone like Craig Spence. Yeah, I think it's a little bit more, there's more complexity involved. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Oh, there is a book by Robert Whiting coming out this month. It's about, I always get the title off, the gamblers, the smugglers, the fraudsters, these kind of con men who shaped, the outsiders who shaped post-war or modern Japan. I'm not sure, but I think Spence is mentioned in the book. That's why I wanted to cover Craig Spence. Anyways, if you like this, please give it a like, subscribe. If you have any requests, put them down below, and I'm going to try to put all the links, the archive links to Craig Spence in there as well. And I hope you have a really good day. Take care.